Are you overdue or afraid that you're going to go overdue? Okay, here is what you have to know about the due date. And let me just tell you, it's also induction season right now, which is the time of year when your care provider is more likely to push induction because it falls around the holidays. This also coincides with C-section rates rising. Your care provider is going to find literally every single excuse that they can to induce you, especially if they happen to be category 5 or if they have external pressure from the overall medical system. Now, we are in an epidemic of induction culture where you basically start thinking about your due date almost as soon as you get pregnant. It's like, well, when are you due? And then you start counting down to that date, and that's the day that your baby needs to be born by. And as you're approaching that date, you need to do all of the things to make sure that you go into labor by that date, because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to have the pressure to induce labor. This leads to the membrane sweeps. This leads to looking for the natural induction methods and ways to prepare your body. But I'm telling you right now that after reading this book, In Your Own Time by Sarah Wickham, I cannot, okay? So Dr. Sarah Wickham really goes deep, and I do highly recommend that you pick up this actual book. But here are some things that I recently pulled after learning about just due dates. Number 1, it is completely made up. That's right. The due date was completely made up. The very earliest we have of knowledge around what the due date was Aristotle, who I kind of have a bone to pick with because he's also said that women's bodies were defective men's bodies. And like it's inside Reclaiming Childbirth, there's a rite of passage about this. So it was completely made up by Aristotle, first of all, who said that he thinks that the pregnancy lasts around 10 lunar months. But then it goes deeper. So back in 1709, they also started to come up with this idea by this guy, Borhavis or something like that. He was a Dutch doctor, and he came up with the idea that pregnancy basically lasts 9 months from the last menstrual period plus 7 days. This was then appropriated as Nagel's rule, and which is now where we come up with the whole last menstrual period thing. Now, the thing about this is that they never specified whether it was the first day of your last menstrual period or your last day of your last menstrual period. And, you know, sometimes your period is like 4 or 5 days, and sometimes it ends like 7 or 8 days. So which is it? Well, that was never specified, but it doesn't matter because it was made up. And it also has patriarchal roots. So the whole reason why they came up with the idea of the due date and needed to have an algorithm for the due date was to establish paternity. And how many doctors might have been bribed by a man who wanted to prove that a child was his, even if the baby wasn't his, to be able to say, this woman has to marry me. I mean, you just have to look, like, it's patriarchal bullshit. Okay, so even if we accept that the due date is made up, obviously there is a timeline for pregnancy. However, this varies. Even if you know your conception date, this varies. So if you're trying right now to figure out your exact conception date or you know it, well, the median is still 40 weeks and 5 days from the conception date. And 70% of babies are born on either within 280 days plus 10 days of the last menstrual period. That leaves 30% of the population that doesn't. So either earlier or later. 30%. That also means, like, first of all, your period isn't even accurate. If you really track your menstrual cycle, you'll see that sometimes it's day 28, sometimes it's day 29, sometimes you have an off month and it's day 25, day 30. Like, you also have different ways of your luteal cycle being, like, there's 4 stages to your menstrual cycle. So there's the follicular phase, there is the ovulation, there is the luteal phase, and there's the menstrual stage. And within ovulation, there's like, you could have like a 3-day range where you might ovulate. And it's just not accurate. It's just not accurate. Now, you might be saying, well, what about dating ultrasounds? I had a dating ultrasound and they predicted my due date. Well, that is also inaccurate at predicting the due date. So only 66% of births are within 7 days on either side of that estimated due date. And some, like with 70%, it's within 10 days. So 66%, it's 7 days. So if they say your due date is whatever, then you still have a week between them. So it's more like 41 weeks. Or it can be 10 days, which means you're going over 41 weeks. And how many doctors are already pushing a C-section or an induction around the 39-week mark, and they're saying that you have a big baby or that your baby is like overdue? So if it's only 70%, you also have to look at 30 to 34% of the population that does not fall into this range. So there's variations in your estimated due date and when the baby's actually going to be ready. Now, here's the other one. Can they really tell the size of your baby and whether or not that baby is ready to be born and what your actual due date is from the size? No. Variations in size happen even in utero. So this means that you could be 35 weeks and somebody else could be 35 weeks. And then when they measure the babies, they're like, well, this one's measuring behind and this one's measuring ahead. And the truth is like, it's just different sizes. You're more likely to measure behind if you're a smaller build. You're also more likely to measure ahead if you're a smaller build and your baby is set to come out earlier and you don't know it. You're more likely to have, like, if you have something in your genetic makeup that just has you grow smaller babies and gestate them longer, well, that dating ultrasound doesn't work. That estimation of when your baby needs to be born, you can't figure that out from a dating ultrasound. In fact, that's how I got tricked into almost scheduling an induction, but I'm stubborn, so I didn't. But I got tricked out of my home birth because they said your baby is measuring 2 weeks behind where they're supposed to be when I was 35 weeks pregnant. In reality, my baby just needed to catch up. He was set to be almost 8 pounds when he was born, and he was set to come out at 41 weeks. So his head was a lot larger than the rest of him, and then that skewed the data on the ultrasound. So I'm looking at my records, and I'm seeing growth normal. Head's a little bit bigger. It's in the 95th percentile. And then they're like, the body's in the 2nd percentile. And I'm like, okay, but then he caught up in growth. Now, if I had induced like they wanted me to, maybe I would have ended up with an even more traumatic birth than I had. So here's the bottom line. Your due date is a guess date. It's completely arbitrary. It's made up. It's based on patriarchal structures where they were just trying to establish paternity, and there's no telling that they actually were listening to any women at that time. And I'm pretty sure that back then, if women could have spoken up, they would have said, you guys are all full of shit, and stop trying to make our bodies fit into some arbitrary timeline. That's not how it works at all. And midwives didn't have the literacy to be able to write counter arguments to these doctors that were now saying that menstrual periods and everything had to be to calculate the due date. And if the baby is past that, then it's a problem. And then, of course, we get induction in the in the 90s, whereas beforehand, it wasn't as common to induce labor because we didn't have the tools yet. But once we had the ability to mess with nature even more, well, you know, it's way more convenient to put your baby on a timeline for your doctor, right? Not convenient for you, not convenient for your baby. It causes a whole bunch of problems, which again, you can read more if you go and pick up Dr. Sarah Wickham's book in your own time. I know it's backwards, but I mean, you can see the cover. It's on Amazon too. I'm diving deep into this book because you know what? It's induction season, and I have a whole deeper dive video that I'm going to be doing on this, but it's not set to come out until the new year. Based on my 26 things you need to know if this is your first time planning a true natural birth. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful. At the same time, these deep dive videos that I've been doing every single Wednesday, they are just packed with information that you need to know to plan and get your true empowered birth, your natural birth, and avoid 99.9% of the misconceptions and common traps, the natural birth traps, the induction traps, everything that leads you to think that your body is broken and defective when really it's not. And to basically aim for a true natural birth and pull back only as much as needed. Finally, if you want to go and get something that's going to help you avoid an induction or help someone else avoid an induction, well, you can get the Empowered Birth Toolkit, which subscribes you to the newsletter, but maybe you're not ready to subscribe to the newsletter, in which case the other way to get the access to my induction season toolkit, just go to the link in my bio or go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/induction and just click on the yellow button and it'll take you right there. It's a Google Drive. But if you do want to subscribe to the newsletter, then you go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/toolkit. You get everything, including my induction traps module from my workshop, so my Empowered Birth workshop. And in addition to that, I also put in how to confidently say no, which comes from the module on birth advocacy within the Your Empowered Birth Academy program. So what I do inside of the Empowered Birth Toolkit is I basically put things in and I take things out. I'm rotating my resources so that even if you can't possibly afford Academy, or you're not ready to purchase Academy yet, or you're not ready to purchase any information yet, you don't have to. Information is free. So I put out all information. The only thing you really pay for when you purchase any of my products is access to me. So this way you can get a laser coaching call, which is basically, I don't sell you on this call, I help you. So the idea is I want you to do the work and I want you to have an empowered birth, whether you work with me or not. So I give you access to my workbooks. I give you access to my course modules. I give you access to all of my little research things that I've picked up, all of my little mini guides, everything gets rotated through this Empowered Birth Toolkit. And then in addition, once a week, you get a deep dive newsletter that tells you more about what's going on in the Empowered Birth community. You're told more of my secrets to empowered birth, some of the pinnacle of my consciousness of what I'm working on now. It comes through that newsletter. So basically all you have to do is go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/toolkit to get that. And if you're not quite ready to join the Empowered Birth community, but you do want some help avoiding induction, then it's empoweringmomsbirth.com/induction. And don't worry, all you have to do really is go to the link in my bio, go to the link tree, and all of the information is there, or just go to my website and you'll be able to find what you need through the start guide. All right. So again, remember, due dates are arbitrary. You can avoid the whole induction fiasco if you just start recognizing that we are in an induction epidemic. Pick up this book in your own time by Dr. Sarah Wickham and go get the Induction Season Toolkit. After all, it's free. You don't even have to put in your name and email. What do you have to lose? Absolutely nothing. All right. So I love you, and I will be back with more tips and more insights from in your own time and everything else that I've picked up over the last 11 years on induction so that you don't get tricked this induction season. All right. I love you. Namaste. And happy empowered birth journey. Bye now.